Hey YouTube! Today's video is the second video in a two-part series on discipleship, evangelism, and the Great Commission. So my 29th and 30th YouTube videos go together, but if you're watching this one before video number 29, it's not a big deal. They go together, but it's not important in which order that you watch them in. Before we get started, I want to ask you to please take a moment, hit the like button, subscribe to this channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video. Many people have the faulty understanding that because they're a Christian who goes to church, that automatically makes them a disciple. Some people understand the difference between being saved and being an active disciple. But they still might not believe that they have a calling to ministry. Well, being a disciple is not a calling. It's a command. God told us to observe all things that he commanded. So in order to do that, we need to be taught by someone who has been taught by someone else, reaching all the way back to when Jesus taught his original disciples. In many ways, discipleship is a lot like apprenticeship. Many people spend the last year of their school doing an apprenticeship under the supervision of someone with a lot of experience who knows what they're doing. Going to church can be a lot like school, but the final step before teaching what you have yourself learned is going hands-on under the watchful eye of somebody with more experience. The order usually goes something like this. I will watch you do it, then I can help you do it. Then you let me do it while you help. Then you watch me do it. Then you launch me off to go do it myself. I get goosebumps to think of all that God wants to do if we would just let him have his way and be obedient. This is what makes the difference between a spectator and someone who wants to get some playing time in God's game. In order to get playing time, so to speak, we need to show up and give it our all in practice so that we are no longer bench warmers. We should always encourage people to move out of their comfort zone so that they can grow. God likes to stretch us. If they need to get to church regularly, then we need to encourage them to get to church regularly. If they need to get out of the pews and into a ministry, then we need to nudge them in that direction. If they are thriving at ministry and they need to be made a ministry leader, then we should raise them up. We should always be seeking to raise people up from within our own flocks, rather than always trucking some leadership in from other places. God's will may not be that we remain at the same church for 50 years. He might be wanting to do really big things through those who are willing to make the commitment and to put one foot in front of the other in obedience to him. If we do that, it will be exciting to see what the Lord does through everyday people like you, me, and the people we disciple. However, not everybody is called to plant a church, but we are all called to plant a disciple. The only way to do this is to be a disciple ourselves. The more we invest in the lives of others, the farther out our tentacles will reach for Jesus. The word disciple is mysteriously missing from the 22 books of the New Testament that come after the book of Acts. This has puzzled astute Bible students for many generations. Many have suggested that maybe Paul and the other writers simply chose to change the word disciple into brothers or saints. Others have suggested that maybe Jesus lowered his standard of commitment after the disciples, so the word disciple did not apply to ordinary believers. I am convinced that both of these ideas as to why the word disciple is missing from the New Testament after the book of Acts are incorrect. Compared to the rest of the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and the book of Acts were written last. I think this is because the disciples thought Jesus would be coming back during their lifetime. As they started to get older, it began to dawn on them that they might die before the Lord returned, so they had better write this stuff down for you and me. This means that Paul's letters were written before the Gospels and the book of Acts. Since the word disciple is used in the Gospels by Jesus, and the Gospels were written after the rest of the New Testament, this disproves the idea that the word was just changed. This shows that the word disciple was used in the early church stemming back to Jesus himself. Luke actually wrote the book of Luke and Acts after being discipled by Paul himself. This means that the vocabulary Luke used to write would have been influenced by Paul to a very, very high degree. Luke speaks of Paul having disciples, yet he wrote after Paul did, and the word disciple is missing from Paul's writings. Well, what does this tell us? This tells us that maybe the question, why is the word disciple missing, should be changed into the question, what is the difference between the Gospels and the book of Acts and the rest of the New Testament? When we look at the right question, we see that the Gospels and the book of Acts have a different theme, which differentiates them from the epistles and the book of Revelation. Simply put, the Gospels record the life of Jesus, and the book of Acts records the birth, development, and growth of the church. This included the gospel message Jesus gave to the disciples, how they spread it to Jerusalem, to Judea, Samaria, and then to the Gentile world. The epistles in the book of Revelation were written about and to established churches whose body functions were already working. They deal with life within the church because they focus more on doctrine, leadership, organization, function, end times, and how we are supposed to treat one another. The word disciple is a birth and a growth term. There's two aspects to being a disciple. Disciples are those who share the gospel with others and make disciples of the people who respond. This matches the gospel and the book of Acts to a T. On the other hand, when the churches have been established after disciple making has happened, we see the Bible refer to these believers now as sisters, brothers, and saints. Therefore, the gospel and the book of Acts address the subject of kingdom birth and growth. The remainder of the New Testament deals with life within the established churches and the things which are to come, the exciting things which are to come, the serious things which are to come, and the persecution things which are to come. Jesus certainly did not lower the standard for us since the original 12, as shown in John chapter 17, verses 18 through 23, where Jesus says, "As you sent me into the world, I also have sent them into the world. And for their sakes I sanctify myself, that they also may be sanctified by the truth. I do not pray for these alone, but also for those who will believe in me through their word, that they all may be one, as you, Father, are in me, and I in you, that they also may be one in us, that the world may believe that you sent me, and the glory which you gave me I have given them, that they may be one just as we are one, I in them, and you in me, that they may be made perfect in one, and that the world may know that you have sent me, and have loved them as you have loved me." These beautiful words from Jesus Christ himself shows us that Jesus has the same standards today as he did from day one. It is his will for every one of his followers to be made into disciples and make disciples within each one's sphere of influence in the world. When we're honest with ourselves, we see that most Christians are not actively involved with evangelism. Evangelism is proclaiming the great news of salvation to those who are lost. It's telling people about Jesus. We offer up, myself included, we offer up a lot of pathetic excuses to weasel out of our responsibility. Friends, when we fail to share the gospel with others, we fail at Jesus' command to make disciples. If we don't have time, then something else is taking up the time that belongs to God. We surely don't want to steal from God, right? No, of course not, friends. Every believer who is a disciple, who then goes on to be a disciple maker, will engage in the act of evangelism. We should be very sensitive to opportunities for evangelism. God will put people in our path who are ready to respond if we would just open up our eyes and be willing to go out on a limb and share Jesus with them. The person who is serious about following Jesus and obeying his commands makes this an absolute lifestyle. He or she understands that it is not optional to make disciples because Jesus gave us the order. Anybody who is not actively seeking to share the gospel and making disciples is living outside of God's will. If this applies to you, consider this a call to action. Don't feel bad. Consider this a call to action. It is my prayer that God will use this video to spur someone on to the next level of relationship and obedience to the Lord, myself included. The new believer is a lot like an infant. They need a lot of attention if they're going to develop and mature. Satan and his demons would love nothing more than to have us neglect the new baby Christian. They need attention from the second they are born. They need to be taught the standards of biblical living instead of the watered-down, seeker-friendly versions that are so widespread in Christianity today. We all need to be brought back to square one to be discipled so we can understand our responsibility and be enabled to make disciples out of other people. This is how we fulfill the Great Commission, one person at a time. We need to teach people who have received Jesus how to win others to Jesus. It astonishes me how we give some little feeble claps when people respond to an altar call. But then we go home and we really cheer when our favorite team scores a touchdown or makes a basketball goal. This is the opposite of what should be happening, friends. We should be cheering more for the new Christian because they just left death and entered into life. A sinner was just saved from an eternity separated from God and is now a child of the King who will be going to heaven when their life here is completed. And all we can offer up is a few half-hearted claps. All clapping aside, evangelism is just the very first step. We must always keep in mind that a person who is not adequately discipled will not go on to disciple others. The Great Commission is a call to make disciples, not just simply to evangelize. The Great Commission is how God chose to get his message out to the world. Evangelism is just the tip of the missile. We want the missile to actually penetrate the target so it will reach its mark deep within the disciple's heart. Again, evangelism and discipleship go hand in hand. We need to consider evangelism the first step, but let's not leave it unfinished. Just like babies need to learn how to walk, talk, read, and spell, new believers need to be taught all about being a child of God. We want to release these well-fed Christians into the world, prepared to repeat the same process with others until Christ's work is done and he returns. This is certainly not for the faint of heart, as people are going to make fun of us and possibly persecute us. We must remember that a disciple is not above his master. A lot of people hated Jesus, so a lot of people are going to hate us too. How's that for a promise to underline in our Bibles? This is one reason why the new believer needs to be taught what the Bible says, so that he or she does not get a touchy-feely, God's going to make me healthy and wealthy, watered-down, false version of Christianity that is so prevalent in the churches today. There are a few ways that we as the church can encourage and promote discipleship. Some people sit in the chairs as spectators for quite some time before taking the plunge and committing themselves wholeheartedly to Jesus Christ to serve him. When this happens, it is truly a time for celebration, followed by preparing them for a lifelong journey of following Christ and making disciples. One cool way that we can train up disciples would be to actually have a class on evangelism. We could discuss the different evangelism tools, including gospel tracts, street witnessing, practical tips, and wisdom about evangelism. As believers, we all know that we should tell others about Jesus, But sometimes we just need to be shown how and encouraged to get practice. I would base this class on a book called One Thing You Can't Do in Heaven by Mark Cahill. And let me show you this book. So I really highly recommend this book. It's One Thing You Can't Do in Heaven by Mark Cahill. Let me just read the back of the book for you. It says, "Are you ready for eternity? If so, are you helping others to get ready for that journey into eternity that each of us must take? As believers, we all know we should tell others about the Lord, but we don't know how. This practical book will give you ideas for starting conversations, examples of witnessing situations, and answers to common questions. It will help motivate and equip you to reach both friends and strangers for Jesus for the rest of your life." So this class could even include the whole group going out together and doing some street witnessing to get some real life practice. They could also do some role playing with each other. We must always remember that the time to tell about Jesus is now, because evangelism will not be needed in heaven. There can be many reasons why true Christian discipleship is declining as an active Christian practice today. I think one of the reasons why this is happening is because we are so busy, or at least we tell ourselves that. It is much easier to give the gospel, hand them a Bible, have them fill out a decision card, pray with them real quick, and send them on their way with a feel-good message than it is to actually invest ourselves into their lives. Then we proudly announce that we had 50 salvations this weekend. Oftentimes we see these new believers around church and we don't even remember their names. Again, I think that this is a time issue. This is not a time issue in the sense of not having time, but not making the time. We all have families, jobs, responsibilities, honey-do lists, television shows that we like, and 1,001 other things going on in any given day of our lives. With all of these things competing for our attention, it is easy to place what Jesus said to do on the back burner, thinking that someone else will do it or that we've already completed our responsibility. All of these things in our lives are certainly important, some more than others, but so is doing what Jesus commanded us to do when he said to make disciples. Just as we are called to make disciples, we are to make time to make disciples. Often our busy lives are just a big excuse to put other things as a priority in front of God. God certainly would not have commanded us to make disciples if he knew that we wouldn't have time. This is where discipline comes into play. Just as we are to be good stewards of the provision God gives us, we are to be good stewards of the time he has given us. In today's day and age, we are all in a hurry, running on the treadmill of life. We have set schedules of when to work, when to eat, when to go to the gym, when to take a break, and when to go to church. This is the key to drive my point home. We are not just members of the church from 7 o'clock until 8:30 on Wednesday nights. We are members of the church 24/7, 365, whether we wake or sleep. We need to work, spend time with our families, and take care of our responsibilities. We also need to make time to truly be a church family that disciples each other as God intended for his members of his kingdom. Part of discipling is taking care of each other. We are all part of each other, and when one part of the body hurts, we all hurt. We are to spur each other on to holy living, love one another, and help each other grow into the full potential that God has for us. This involves investing ourselves into one another instead of just giving a half-hearted hello when we see each other after church as we run to our cars. I myself have certainly been known to get up from where I was seated and snake away to my car the second church ends, nearly running over Miss Whitaker in her walker. I have also been known to back my car into the parking space, so that I can beat traffic as I leave a big black mark in the parking lot where my car was. So the Great Commission is a command. It's a marching order given by Jesus Christ to his disciples and applies to all Christians within their sphere of influence. In fact, we are all called to be missionaries, locally and worldwide. In other words, we don't all have to move away to a faraway jungle in order to be missionaries. However, we do have the responsibility to make disciples, which has huge implications for local and world missions. Being a true missionary is not a glorified vacation, nor is it a quick trip to the university campus to distribute gospel tracts. These, in and of themselves, are not bad things. However, being a true missionary is so much more than that. True missionaries are people who immerse themselves within a society for the sole purpose of reaching them for Jesus Christ and training them up to be pastors themselves. This process takes time. Church planting is like having little babies. If I want to be a missionary in a deep jungle, I will need to go be accepted by the tribe, gain their trust, teach them the gospel, and teach them to observe all that Jesus Christ commanded. In other words, I'm going to need to infiltrate that society, whatever it is, to become one of them. This is not an easy thing to do and will only be possible by an obedient servant who is totally reliant on the power of the Holy Spirit. Being a missionary on a university campus, as I mentioned earlier, is not just going street witnessing once a week. The college missionary must totally immerse himself or herself into the culture and lifestyle of a student. The best way to do this is to be a student. We want to infiltrate the classes and converse with them in everyday student activities. Since multiple worldviews are discussed, we must accurately and respectively represent Christianity to them. There will be some whose eyes will be opened as we take, for example, critical New Testament classes alongside them and interact with the instructors and the fellow students. This will definitely not be an easy task. Most Christian students in college today try to keep a low profile so that they could just make it out with their degree. Whew. But that is not what being a missionary is all about, and it's definitely not for the faint of heart. I had the privilege of having some very interesting discussions with people when I took a biology class at community college. I was able to share with them things that they had not learned from the textbooks. Being a member of the class gave me inside access to their lives as a peer. Many people are called to be missionaries also in the workplace. This fits the description of immersing themselves in a culture. And it's very practical because people have to work anyways. Even in an office, the missionary is representing Jesus Christ to the people he or she spends their life with every day. This will mean befriending the atheist who works in the cubicles all around you. We don't have to tell them that their sin is okay in order to be friendly to them. As a Christian, only the highest work ethic will do, as we are to do everything as if we are doing it for the Lord. This means for the Christian janitor that the sink should be so clean that you could eat a hamburger off it if you wanted to. We need to always be willing and ready to give an answer to everyone who asks us about the reason for our faith in Jesus Christ. There are a lot of people who say bad things about Christians, so the missionary in the workplace should debunk all of those myths with real-life action. You just never know, Christian, how your faithfulness just might make someone take a serious look at your God. We need to always be available for our coworkers, even if it takes years for them to come around. Sometimes the atheist may be closer to coming to the Lord than you think, and God may have planted you in their life to show them his love. In conclusion, the implication making disciples has on local and world missions is that these are not day trips. Being a true missionary within your sphere of influence involves immersing yourself in a certain culture as a representative of Jesus Christ. This involves opening yourself up to people and being the best worker that you can be. Being a missionary means taking a special interest in the lives of others who can in turn be discipled. We are all agents for Christ. Let us be good stewards of the Great Commission wherever the Lord places us in life. We must always remember that this is not just the pastor's job. The pastor just trains us to do the work of an evangelist and a discipler wherever the road of life leads us. Thank you for watching. Please hit the like button. Subscribe to this channel. Have a great day. God bless you. Go and make disciples.